My name is Clara Beaumont. For most of my 31 years, I've been an architect of spaces, both physical and emotional. I live in Port Blossom, a city in the Pacific Northwest where the sky is a perpetual watercolor of soft grays and deep blues, and the scent of rain on pine needles is the region's unofficial perfume. I've always found a quiet comfort in the logic of blueprints and the certainty of load-bearing walls. In my work, every line has a purpose, every material a known tolerance. For a long time, I tried to apply that same structural integrity to my family, believing I could be the beam that held up a crumbling foundation. I believed that love, like good engineering, could withstand any pressure if you just designed it correctly. I was wrong. My family consists of my father, Robert, a man whose kindness was always a little softer than his spine, my mother, Helen, whose anxieties were a constant, low-grade fever, and my younger sister, Isla, a beautiful, fragile whirlwind of a person who lived in a state of perpetual crisis. Rounding out the core was my mother's sister, Aunt Beatrice, a woman who wielded passive aggression with the precision of a surgeon. The trouble, as it often does, began not with a bang, but with a slow, creeping erosion. It started 6 years ago, when the old paper mill on the outskirts of Port Blossom finally shuttered, taking my father's managerial job with it. He was too young for retirement, too old, he said, to start over. A quiet desperation began to seep into the floorboards of my childhood home. Around the same time, my mother's anxiety bloomed into full-blown panic attacks, and Isla, fresh from another broken relationship, had what the family gently called a breakdown. I was 25, just starting to gain my footing at Helios Design Group, working long hours and fueled by coffee and ambition. I remember the phone call from my father, his voice thin and reedy. "We don't know what to do, Claire," he'd whispered. "Isla needs help, the kind we can't afford. Your mother is beside herself." So I stepped in. I wasn't asked directly, it was more of an unspoken assumption. I was the stable one, the one who had her life together. I drained my savings to pay for Isla's stay at a private wellness clinic, a place with serene gardens and holistic therapy that promised to put her back together again. When she came out, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They called it a miracle. No one mentioned the $18,000 that had vanished from my account. No one offered to repay me. The gratitude was a brief, warm glow that faded as quickly as a summer sunset. It became a pattern. A little help with the mortgage payment 1 month, covering the cost of my mother's new medication the next. Then came the suggestion, floated by my mother during a Sunday dinner. "Wouldn't it be easier, Clara, if we had a sort of family cushion? Something we could all draw from in an emergency. You're so good with numbers, you could manage it." And so, the Hearthfire Fund was born. It was a name I chose, something that was meant to evoke warmth, safety, and home. It was also a lie. It wasn't a fund we all contributed to, it was an account I opened in my name, funded exclusively by a significant portion of my monthly salary. I became the quiet administrator of their lives. I set up automatic payments for their utilities, their insurance premiums, my mother's prescriptions. They gave me their passwords and account numbers, not out of trust, but out of a weary convenience. They called me organized. They meant they didn't have to deal with it. My life became a silent balancing act. I put off upgrading my small apartment in the historic Pearl District, the one with the drafty windows and the charming but unreliable plumbing. I politely declined trips with friends, citing work, when the truth was that Isla's emergency dental surgery had wiped out my vacation fund. I learned to love the taste of lentil soup for dinner, night after night, telling myself it was a healthy choice. I was the financial seawall holding back the tide of their instability, and for a while, I convinced myself this was a noble role. This was what it meant to be a good daughter, a good sister. But the foundation of my compliance began to crack 2 years ago at Christmas. Isla had announced she needed a whole new set of all-weather tires for her car. I had just covered her security deposit on a new apartment after she'd impulsively quit her job. I told her, gently, that I couldn't swing it right now. The fallout was immediate. She accused me of judging her, of not supporting her journey to stability. Later that night, my father texted me, "Claire, please try to be more compassionate. You don't understand the pressure she's under." Something inside me fractured then. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, internal splintering. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I created a spreadsheet. I started documenting everything, every transfer, every bill paid, every desperate late-night request. I attached copies of invoices and screenshots of text exchanges. It wasn't for them, not yet. It was for me. It was proof that the weight I was carrying was real, that I wasn't imagining the constant, one-sided flow of energy and resources. The breaking point arrived last month, disguised as a wellness opportunity. Isla posted in our family group chat, "Hey everyone, I know things are tight, but I found this incredible somatic resonance workshop in Sedona. It's supposed to be life-changing for trauma recovery. Could the Hathfire Fund possibly cover it?" She included a link. The cost was $4,500. I read the message and felt a profound stillness. I waited, wanting to see how they would respond. My father, the same man whose car insurance I'd paid 3 weeks prior, replied almost instantly, "That sounds like something you really deserve, sweetie. Let's see what Claire thinks." My mother added a string of sparkling heart emojis. They didn't see it as my money anymore. They saw it as the money. The fund had become a separate entity in their minds, a magical wellspring that I was merely the custodian of. The gratitude had long since curdled into expectation. The final blow came 2 days before the message that would change everything. We were on one of our monthly family video calls, which had devolved, as they always did, into a group therapy session for Isla, with me as the silent, off-screen benefactor. I tried to share my own news. "I'm so excited," I started. "I was just promoted to senior project lead at Helios." My father cut me off, holding up a hand. "That's great, honey. Real quick, though, can we circle back to Isla's living situation? She's not feeling safe in her current building. They wanted my help, my financial help, of course, to move her into a luxury apartment complex with a doorman and a gym." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list my grievances. I just felt a sudden, glacial calm. "Perhaps," I said, my voice even, "it's time for someone else to take the lead on this." The silence that followed was heavy and cold. It was the silence of shocked indignation. My mother's smile froze on her face. Isla's eyes narrowed. My father looked away from the camera, frowning. 48 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was 8:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sketching a preliminary design for a new community library, lost in the pleasant geometry of it all, when the notification popped up on my screen. It was a new message in the Beaumont family group chat from my mother. "We've all talked, and we think it's best if you step away for a little while, Clara. Isla needs some space to heal without feeling judged." We all do. Beneath the message, a single, sterile icon appeared. A thumbs up from Aunt Beatrice. Just like that. A digital exile. A polite shunning delivered via text message. I stared at my phone, the light from the screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. A profound, aching sorrow washed over me, but beneath it, something else stirred, a flicker of cold, hard clarity. They weren't just taking me for granted. They were casting me out for daring to suggest I wasn't an infinite resource. My fingers moved across the screen, my reply short and precise. "Understood. I'll respect your decision and step away from the Hathfire Fund, too." I didn't wait for a response. That night, I logged into my bank account. I navigated to the recurring payments I had meticulously set up over the years. The mortgage assistance. The utility bills. The insurance premiums. The pharmacy auto refills. One by one, I canceled them. Then, I found the account I had named the Hathfire Fund. I transferred the remaining balance, my money, back into my personal savings. And then I clicked the button, Close Account. The confirmation screen felt like a deep, shuddering breath. At 3:11 a.m., my phone, resting on my nightstand, began to vibrate. It was a harsh, insistent buzz that ripped through the quiet of my apartment. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. By the time the soft, gray light of a Port Blossom dawn filtered through my window, my screen showed 89 missed calls. There was one new voicemail. It was from my father. His voice wasn't angry, not yet. It was frayed with panic and confusion. Claire? What happened? The bank, they flagged everything. The mortgage payment was declined. I just got an alert. Are you okay? Call me. I took a sip of my coffee, watching the rain begin to streak down the glass. I picked up my phone and texted him back a single sentence. I'm honoring your decision. That was before they understood the full scope of it. They thought I had just paused a single contribution. They hadn't yet realized that the quiet, unassuming architect they had so casually dismissed was the only thing holding their entire precarious structure together. They had asked me to step away and, in doing so, had unwittingly pulled the master support beam from their own house. The collapse was just beginning. The silence that followed my text message lasted for approximately 6 hours. It was a tense, charged quiet, the kind that precedes a storm. Then, the deluge began. First, it was a frantic call from my mother. Clara, the pharmacy just called. They said my insulin prescription wasn't authorized for refill. The automatic payment was canceled. Did you change something? I closed the account it was tied to, I said, my voice calm. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the plans for the new library, a sanctuary of order and knowledge. Well, can you change it back? I need it by tomorrow. There was no preamble, no asking why. Just a demand. No, Mom, I can't. The account is closed. You'll have to set up a new payment method. There was a sputtering on the other end of the line. But I don't know how to do that online. You always handled it. I'm sure the pharmacist can walk you through it over the phone, I replied, keeping my tone helpful but distant. I felt a pang of something, not quite guilt, but the phantom limb of responsibility twitching. I ignored it. This was the space they had asked for. Next came Isla. A string of increasingly agitated texts. My car insurance just lapsed. I got an email. WDF? Claire, are you getting my texts? The power company sent a shut-off notice. You can't just do this. You knew my therapy payment was due today. This is going to set back my recovery. I read them and set my phone face down on the cool surface of my desk. I focused on the precise angle of a roofline, the elegant curve of a reading nook. Each line I drew was a choice, a deliberate act of creation. It was the opposite of the messy, reactive life I had been living for them. By Sunday morning, my father's confusion had curdled into a mix of anger and fear. He left a series of voice notes, his voice growing more strained with each one. The bank has frozen our checking account, Clara. They said there was suspicious activity with all the declined auto payments. They think our identities have been compromised. You need to call them and clear this up. This is a mess. The Homeowners Association sent a penalty notice for the late fee. What did you do? Why would you do this to us? After everything we've done for you. Everything we've done for you. That line struck me. I thought of the sleepless nights, the sacrificed vacations, the constant, low-humming anxiety of managing their finances on top of my own demanding career. I thought of my promotion they had brushed past. What had they done for me, except provide me with the opportunity to parent my own parents? The inevitable summons came that afternoon. My cousin, Mark, sent me a calendar invite for a video call. Family meeting. Mark was a neutral party, a peacemaker by nature, and I knew they had enlisted him to mediate, to get me to turn the money back on. I accepted the invitation. I spent the next hour preparing. I opened the spreadsheet on my laptop. I printed a summary page. I poured myself a glass of cool water and sat at my dining table, the rain drumming a steady rhythm against the window pane. I was nervous, my heart thrumming in my chest, but I also felt a strange sense of resolve. I was no longer defending my actions. I was simply presenting the facts. When I joined the call, their faces appeared in a grid, a digital tribunal. My father, pacing in his living room. My mother, seated on the sofa, her arms crossed tightly, her face pale. Isla, red-eyed and sullen, looking like a victim. And Aunt Beatrice, perched in an armchair, a silk scarf knotted at her throat, her expression one of severe disappointment. Isla spoke first, her voice thick with emotion. I can't believe you would do this to us, Clara. Just cut us off. Abandon us. I didn't abandon you, Isla, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I listened to you. You, Mom, and Dad asked for space. You told me to step away. So I did. Completely. That's not what we meant, my father interjected, stopping his pacing to glare at the camera. We didn't mean for you to destroy everything. I didn't destroy anything, Dad. I simply stopped maintaining it. The structure you were all living in was one I built and paid for. The Hathfire Fund wasn't some magical family inheritance. It was my salary. It was my savings. It was for the family, my mother said quietly, as if that explained everything. Was it? I asked. I took a breath. I'd like to share something. I clicked the share screen button. The spreadsheet filled their displays. It was titled Hathfire Fund Distribution Ledger, 2018 present. Rows and rows of data, meticulously organized. Dates, payees, amounts, categories. January 15, 2018, Serenity Gardens Wellness Clinic, $18,000, Isla, Health. June 22, 2019, Port Blossom Auto Repair, $850, Dad, Car Maintenance. November 5, 2020, Dr. Miller, DDS, $2,200, Isla, Emergency Dental. Monthly, U.S. Bank, $650, Parents, Mortgage Assistance. Monthly, Port Blossom Utilities, $275, Average, Parents, Utilities. Monthly, Express Scripts, $410, Mom, Prescription Meds. I scrolled slowly, deliberately. The page went on and on. There were vet bills for their aging golden retriever, insurance copays for Isla's endless therapy sessions, the cost of a new water heater for their house, even the $4,500 for the Sedona workshop that I had earmarked before their message, a payment that now had canceled written next to it in red. The silence on the call was absolute. I could see my mother's hand fly to her mouth. My father had stepped back from his camera, his face ashen. Isla was staring, her jaw slack. Who even keeps track of things like this? Aunt Beatrice finally sneered, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. Someone who is tired of being told she's imagining things, I replied, not looking at her, but at the numbers. Someone who knew that one day, she'd be accused of being selfish and would need to remember the truth. I clicked to the final tab, the summary page. A single number glowed in a bolded cell at the bottom of the screen. Over the past 6 years, I said, letting the words hang in the air, my direct and indirect contributions to what you all called the family cushion total $112,450. A choked sound came from my mother. My father sank onto the arm of the sofa as if his legs could no longer support him. You've been keeping tabs on us, he whispered, horrified. No, Dad, I said, my voice softening with a sorrow that surprised me. I've been keeping myself afloat while trying to keep you from drowning. And I've realized that by doing so, I was preventing you from ever learning to swim. Isla finally found her voice, and it was filled with the venom of a cornered animal. This is just about money for you, isn't it? You're bitter. You're bitter because you're the boring, responsible one and you want a medal for it. No, Isla, I said calmly. I don't want a medal. I want respect. And I want to be seen as a person, not a resource. You never came to me to talk about my life, my job, my hopes. You only ever came to me when you needed something. The fund wasn't a cushion. It was a transaction. And I am no longer willing to be the sole party funding it. I closed the spreadsheet. I looked directly into the camera, meeting each of their gazes. I have already notified the banks. My name has been removed as an authorized user from all your accounts. The shared credit cards have been closed. You wanted me to step away. This is what stepping away truly looks like. From now on, your financial well-being is your own responsibility. My mother was openly weeping now, her shoulders shaking. My father just stared, his face a mask of disbelief. Isla stood up abruptly and stormed out of the frame. A door slammed loudly in the background. Aunt Beatrice, for once, seemed at a loss for words. She simply reached forward and ended the call, plunging my screen back into silence. I sat back in my chair, my hands trembling. The rain had stopped. A sliver of pale sunshine was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the dust motes still dancing in the air. My heart was pounding, a wild drum against my ribs, but for the first time in years, the crushing weight on my chest was gone. I had not set them on fire. I had simply stopped feeding the flames. And in the quiet aftermath, I could finally breathe. The weeks that followed the video call were defined by a profound and unsettling silence. The barrage of texts and calls ceased. My inbox remained empty. It was as if a switch had been flipped and my family, in the absence of my utility, had ceased to exist in my daily life. A part of me, the part conditioned by years of codependency, braced for the next wave, the guilt trip, the manufactured emergency. But it didn't come. Instead, 10 days after the call, my mother appeared at my office. I was in the middle of a design review for a sustainable housing project, my mind immersed in the clean lines of passive solar heating and reclaimed timber, when my assistant, Chloe, poked her head into the conference room. Her eyes were wide. "Clara, I'm so sorry to interrupt," she whispered, "but there's a woman in the lobby. She says she's your mother. She seems very upset." A cold dread washed over me. This was a line that had never been crossed before. My work life was my sanctuary, the one place their chaos had never touched. I excused myself and walked to the lobby. There she was. Helen Beaumont, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her, clutching a thick manila envelope to her chest. Her coat was unbuttoned, and her hair was disheveled. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice brittle. I led her to a small, private alcove with 2 chairs, away from the curious eyes of the reception desk. I remained standing. "The house is in pre-foreclosure," she began, her words tumbling out. "Your father, he just sits on the sofa. He won't even open the mail. Isla locked herself in her room and won't come out. The bank won't speak to us without a financial plan. We don't have a plan, Clara. You were always the plan." I listened, my expression unreadable. I felt a deep, ancestral pull to fix it, to smooth it over, to take the envelope and make the calls. But then I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the years of learned helplessness. When I didn't respond, her desperation hardened into anger. She drew herself up, and a flicker of the matriarch I once knew returned. "I am your mother," she said, her voice rising. "I gave you life. I raised you. And this is how you repay me? By abandoning us when we need you most." A sound escaped my lips. It wasn't a sob or a gasp. It was a laugh. A hollow, weary laugh that held no humor. "Repay you," I said, the words quiet but sharp. "Mom, being born is not a debt to be repaid. You didn't raise me to be a daughter. You groomed me to be a safety net. You taught me that my value was in my utility, that my love was best expressed through financial sacrifice. You never taught me how to set a boundary, because you never intended for me to have any." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "I did not ask for this role," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I didn't volunteer to be the emotional and financial caretaker for 3 other adults. You handed me the burden, piece by piece, until I was carrying so much I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. You want help? Real help? There are credit counselors. There are social services. There are resources for people in your exact situation. But you'll have to be the one to pick up the phone. I'm not your plan anymore." I turned and walked back toward my conference room, the click of my heels on the polished concrete floor sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet lobby. I didn't look back. The final, horrifying piece of the puzzle arrived a week later in a certified letter from my bank's fraud prevention department. The envelope felt heavy official. Inside was a summary of a flagged internal investigation. Someone had attempted to open a small business loan for $95,000. The application was filed under a newly registered LLC, Serene Pathways Wellness Coaching. The primary applicant and guarantor listed on the loan was me, Clara Beaumont. My social security number was correct. My address was correct. The signature on the digital application was a startlingly accurate forgery of my own. My blood ran cold. The loan had been submitted 3 days before the group chat message asking me to step away. It had been denied for one reason only. The application was linked to the Huthfire Fund account as proof of assets, and I had closed that account just as the bank's underwriters were reviewing the file. The closure triggered a high-level fraud alert. I sank into my chair, the letter trembling in my hand. The co-signers on the application were listed as Robert Beaumont and Helen Beaumont. It wasn't just entitlement. It wasn't just desperation. It was a calculated, premeditated act of fraud. The plan became sickeningly clear. They were going to secure a massive loan in my name, under the guise of Isla's business. They would ask me to step away so I wouldn't see the account activity. They would drain the funds, and when the business inevitably failed and the bank came to collect, the debt would be legally mine. They weren't just using me as a safety net. They were trying to strap a bomb to it. The last vestiges of my familial duty, of my guilt and sorrow, evaporated in that moment, replaced by a cold, clarifying rage. This wasn't a family in crisis. This was a conspiracy. I spent the entire weekend methodically dismantling any remaining connection. I filed a formal police report for identity theft, submitting the bank's letter and a sworn affidavit. I forwarded everything to the fraud departments of all 3 credit bureaus and the IRS. I emailed myself every document, creating a digital fortress of evidence. Each keystroke was an act of liberation. That Sunday night, Isla called me from a blocked number. Her voice was syrupy sweet, full of a feigned, tearful remorse. "Claire, I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, "and I understand now. I really do. I'm so sorry for how we treated you. We're still family at the end of the day." She spoke for 5 minutes, a rambling monologue about healing and forgiveness. She never once mentioned the loan. When she finally paused for breath, I asked one simple question. "Isla, did you know about the business loan application?" The silence on the other end of the line was vast and damning. After a few seconds, I heard a soft click. She had hung up. It was in that silence that I finally understood. My family hadn't just collapsed because I'd walked away. They had been rotten from the inside for a very long time. I hadn't caused the decay. I had just been the last person to stop pretending it wasn't there. A few days later, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from my cousin Nathan, Aunt Beatrice's son, the family outcast who had moved to Chicago a decade ago and barely spoken to anyone since. "Heard through the grapevine you finally blew up the bridge," the message read. "Good for you. Just wanted you to know, you're not the first one they tried to drain. You're just the first one who had the guts to turn off the water." Reading his words, I felt a profound sense of validation. It wasn't just me. It was a pattern, a generational sickness. They didn't see me as the villain because I was cruel. They saw me as the villain because I had refused to continue playing the hero in their tragedy. And heroes in those kinds of stories never get a happy ending. They just get used up. 2 months later, I accepted a partnership offer at a boutique firm in Auden Bay, a coastal city 3 states away. I packed up my apartment, sold the furniture I didn't love, and left Port Blossom without a forwarding address. My new apartment was bright and airy, with a small balcony overlooking the ocean. The floors were bare, the walls were white, and for the first time in my life, the silence felt like possibility, not absence. It was a blank blueprint. And it was all mine. It has been nearly a year. 12 months since the 89 missed calls, since the spreadsheet, since I discovered my name on a forged loan application for a business that never existed. I once thought that the space left by my family would be a cavernous, echoing void. I expected to be haunted by guilt, to be ambushed by grief in the quiet moments. But the only thing I feel is a deep, abiding peace. It's not the frantic, performative wellness Isla was always chasing. It's a quiet, foundational peace, the kind that settles into your bones. It's the peace of a phone that only buzzes with messages from friends. It's the peace of looking at my bank account and knowing every dollar is my own, to save, to spend, to invest in my own future. It's the peace that comes from building boundaries of solid stone instead of flimsy drywall. They still try to breach the walls, of course. My mother sent an email on Christmas, a photo of her and my father in front of a sparsely decorated tree. "It's not the same without you," she wrote. I saw the photo not as an olive branch, but as a carefully staged performance of sadness. I deleted it. Isla messaged me on her birthday, a long, rambling essay about her newfound independence, which concluded with a casual request for help with her first and last month's rent on a new place. I blocked her email address. The legal fallout from the loan attempt ended quietly. With my evidence, the police report, and the bank's own investigation, the case was closed. I never heard what, if any, consequences they faced. I chose not to know. Their story was no longer my story. My credit score, which I check monthly like a devout ritual, is pristine. The fortress I built around my identity has held. But the most unexpected consequence of my departure was not the peace it brought me, but the connection it brought from others. The call from my cousin Nathan was just the beginning. At a conference, an older colleague, after hearing a sliver of my story, pulled me aside and shared her own tale of being the family bank until she had to declare bankruptcy to escape them. I started seeing it everywhere, in conversations with friends, in articles online, in the weary eyes of a cashier paying for her mother's groceries with a strained look on her face. There are so many of us, the designated caretakers, the ones who absorb the chaos and foot the bill, praised for our strength until the day we dare to say, no, we are the architects of other people's lives, until we finally decide to design our own. The moment I knew, with unshakable certainty, that I had made the right choice came just a few weeks ago. I was walking home along the waterfront in Auden Bay after a late meeting, the salty air cool on my face. As I passed a small patisserie, I saw a familiar figure sitting at one of the outdoor tables, a silk scarf knotted at her throat. Aunt Beatrice. She saw me. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her composure snapped back into place. She waved, a small, tentative gesture as if we were old friends who had simply lost touch. Against my better judgment, I stopped. She looked me up and down, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Clara. You look, well. I am, I said. The words were simple and true. There was a moment of awkward silence. She stirred her coffee, the tiny spoon clinking against the porcelain. Then, with a breathtaking lack of self-awareness, she leaned forward conspiratorially. Your mother and father are getting by, you know. It's been hard. I was just thinking, she said, her voice dropping to a persuasive murmur. Now that things have settled down, would you ever consider setting something up again? A smaller fund, perhaps. Just for true emergencies. I looked at her, at the unchanged posture of polite entitlement, at the complete, unvarnished audacity of the question. And I laughed. It wasn't the hollow, broken sound from my mother's visit. It was a full, genuine laugh that came from deep in my belly. It was the sound of freedom. When I finished, I smiled at her, a real smile. I already have, Beatrice, I said. It's called my future. I turned and walked away, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore filling the space her voice used to occupy. I don't know if they will ever understand the depth of what they destroyed, not just financially, but emotionally. Maybe, in their version of the story, I will forever be the cold, ungrateful daughter who abandoned them. They can have that story. They can tell it to whomever will listen. Because I know the truth. I am not the villain of their story. I am the protagonist of my own. And I am finally, blessedly, free.